as a result of the unfortunate charges lodged by APD against Chaka Zulu. We are here today because yesterday we learned that TMZ would be running a story about the shooting, and that their story would include certain aspects of the video footage that was captured that evening and some analysis to that footage. In fact, some of that footage, even before TMZ aired it, had been circulating on the internet with some analysis. Of course, as members of his legal team, we had the benefit of having that video surveillance footage for the last several weeks. We knew exactly what was depicted on it, and so we knew exactly what it stood for. We've also had the benefit during the course of our investigation of interviewing several critical eyewitnesses who were at the scene that day, actually saw what went down, what was said. And so we've had the benefit of those interviews during the course of our investigation, and that is also important. Given that the video of the shooting is now circulating on the internet, we felt compelled to have this press conference because there was some reporting, frankly, depicting the decedent as an innocent bystander, and we wanted to make sure that the record was straight. First, the video posted by TMZ is identical to the video footage not only that we received during the course of our investigation, but that APD obtained on the first night of the shooting, on the night of the shooting. TMZ's analysis of the footage is also accurate. That is to say, the decedent and other members of his crew viciously and violently attacked Chaka from behind before a single gunshot was fired. To put everything in perspective, it is important to recognize that the establishment they were at, apartment 4B, was a local restaurant, and that Chaka and a business partner of his were renting out that establishment every Sunday several months prior to this incident, without issue or complication. In other words, Chaka on that evening was at his place of business. After the decedent and his crew arrived there at the establishment, they parked their vehicles in the VIP section and eventually entered the restaurant. The video footage reveals that they were in the restaurant for less than 10 minutes, only to come back outside demanding that they be refunded the money they paid for VIP parking. This establishment, when you got there, you had to be invited there. You had to either have a passcode or personal invitation of Chaka and or his business partner. And so these men were upset that they couldn't get in, and they came back out upset, wanting their money refunded. Shortly after the decedent and his crew exited the restaurant, Chaka, along with a friend, exited the restaurant. He had just received a call from a special guest who was coming to the establishment, the restaurant that night, and he went to go greet his special guest in the parking lot. As he's greeting the guests, the decedent and his crew are mingling around the cars that they parked in the VIP parking spaces. At some point, Chaka and his special guest and their company began to walk toward the restaurant to go back into the restaurant. That is when Chaka was confronted by one of the crew members of the decedent. That crew member's name is Trayvon Robinson. The confrontation went very south very quickly. And as a result, Mr. Robinson began to reach for his waistband. Chaka, in an effort to try to de-escalate the situation, told the young man, "Don't reach for that," on more than one occasion, essentially trying to keep the peace and de-escalate the situation. That is consistent with who this man is. He's a man of peace. He's a son of this city. Everybody loves him. He is a beloved person here, and he is not a man of violence. Unfortunately, that didn't work. An independent eyewitness corroborates this fact. That independent witness was one of the valet attendees, doesn't know Chaka from Adam, doesn't know Tremaine Robinson from Adams. Simply refers to Chaka as the old guy and Tremaine Robinson as the young guy. But eventually says to the City of Atlanta Police Department, this witness says, I saw Tremaine Robinson reaching for his gun. I believed he had a gun, and I overheard Chaka telling him, put that ish away, put that ish away. The video then reveals that at some point, Mr. Robinson motioned to the rest of the decedent and his crew to come to his aid, and then chest bumped Chaka, making the first physical contact with Chaka, at which time Chaka grabbed Mr. Robinson and pushed him up against the car, and in an effort to ensure that he could not reach for his firearm. Seconds later, Chaka is viciously attacked from behind by the decedent and his crew, and in fact, the decedent is the second one to punch and kick and stomp Chaka as he falls to the ground, seeking to take a posture of coverage as he is at this point defenseless, fighting for his life. Fortunately, Chaka's assistant sees this violent assault against Mr. Zulu, and she runs to his aid. This is all captured on video. She jumps on the back of the decedent as he is kicking and stomping and punching Chaka, and begins to hit the decedent in the head and about the head, so much so in an effort to defend his life that it causes the decedent to focus his attention on her and turn to her. Interestingly enough, the initial instigator, Tremaine Robinson, also begins to focus his attention on Chaka's assistant and violently strikes her in the face on 2 occasions, causing her severe damage and causing her to fall to the ground. In any event, this delay or this distraction allowed Chaka to get to his feet, and thankfully so. Before he got to his feet, there are other witnesses who told APD that there was a large man with a gun in the center of this fight saying, "Get the F back, get the F back." And I can tell you here today that on that evening, while Chaka was on the ground and he heard those words, he thought that someone was trying to kill him. Why on earth would they need to get back and or clear the path other than to shoot and kill the person that they were attacking? In any event, Chaka gets to his feet in an effort to get back into the restaurant. But the fight's not over. It's a continuous event, and ultimately, as he gets to his feet, the decedent and Tremaine Robinson are right there charging Chaka to attack him again. This is after they have violently attacked Chaka's assistant. In fear of his life, knowing that the people who attacked him from behind were still in his path to safety, Chaka discharged his weapon lawfully and in self-defense. Milliseconds later, the shooter, Corey Crawford, who has yet to be apprehended or arrested, shot Chaka in the back, had managed to strategically position himself in between 2 cars to take cover, had pulled out his weapon before a shot had been fired, and ultimately, as Chaka shot his weapon in self-defense, he shoots Chaka in the back. Chaka, based on the adrenaline, doesn't know that he's immediately hit, but eventually knows it and eventually is able to get inside the restaurant. That is where his family and his friends call 911 and attempt to render aid. He is rushed to the hospital after having blacked out, and according to the medical professionals at Grady, he almost lost his life that night. It is important to understand this. Based upon our communications in the community, it is our understanding that superiors of the Atlanta Police Department unfortunately were pushing to charge Chaka days after the shooting by only watching the video without interviewing any critical eyewitnesses to the scene. And frankly, you have to question why you would just charge someone by reviewing video footage and not actually interviewing live witnesses at the scene who were there in real time and saw everything and heard everything. But instead, it is our belief, based upon our communications, that APD was trying to charge him. Our team and others pleaded with the City of Atlanta Police Department to conduct a more thorough investigation and to slow the process down. Interview someone, for crying out loud. We worked tirelessly with one another and with Chaka's legal team and investigators to interview those critical eyewitnesses, turning over many of them to the City of Atlanta Police Department, willingly, fully cooperating with the investigation. Despite our efforts, despite our call for them to conduct a thorough investigation, APD failed in every respect. In fact, to date, they haven't interviewed every critical witness or identified every critical witness that was there at the scene that night. In fact, they haven't even interviewed the initial instigator, Trayvon Robinson, who began to reach for his waistband and gun and try to escalate the situation into something that Chaka did not want it to do. It's important to note that from the physical contact to the shots fired, this all occurred over a 21-second period, very quickly, where Chaka is on the ground fighting for his life and ultimately having to make split-second decisions to defend his life so that he could live to see another day. We remain disappointed in APD for deciding to bring charges against Chaka. We remain equally disappointed in the City of Atlanta Police Department for not lodging charges against the individuals who violently attacked Chaka from behind and knocked his assistant out, clearly on video, crimes that are seen and were seen by the City of Atlanta Police Department before they decided to lodge charges against a single individual. And of course, we are extremely disappointed that Corey Crawford still roams these streets, as he is the person who first hit Chaka during the attack from behind and who eventually shot Chaka in the back. At this time, the case is now before District Attorney Fonnie Willis. District Attorney Willis is an experienced prosecutor, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for her and her team. At this time, the Chaka's legal team, myself, Attorney Davis, and Attorney Secret will continue to investigate this matter and cooperate with that investigation because we have nothing to hide. We remain confident that through the judicial process, Chaka will be cleared of all these charges, and we thank you for your time and attention. I want to now turn the mic to Chaka's sister. She wants to talk to you about his hospital stay and his injuries so that you can understand and appreciate that he was in the fight of his life on that evening. Then we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Gabe. My name is Ahmed Obafemi. I am the older sister of Chaka Zulu. Ahmed Chaka Zulu Obafemi, to be exact, his real name. First, my family and I would like to give honor and thanks to the Most High and our ancestors for the fact that my brother is sitting here today. and be clear. You see him sitting, but he is still healing. My brother had to fight for his life that night. When I arrived at the hospital and was able to see him before he was taken to surgery, I touched his body. It was so, so cold to the touch, eerily cold. The amount of blood that he had to receive was at least twice the normal circulating volume of a man his size. So you can only imagine how much blood he lost and how much they had to transfuse him with. Those first few days, weeks even, were very, very critical as he continued to fight for his life. While we prayed, stayed, waited, and watched for him to be able to open his eyes, to be able to attempt to communicate with us, and just to know that he was going to live. So as we sit here today, he is continuing to fight for his life. Because now we have to fight the fact, as Attorney Banks said, that APD has not done right by my brother, our family, the community. Chaka has been a son of Atlanta since he came here to go to college. He is well known in this community. His character speaks for itself. And he has always done what is right. What we want and what we demand is justice. We're still dealing with this traumatic experience, and it's just evolving every day that we see statements, interviews that people are doing, talking about how my brother should be treated, and the fact that no one else has had to answer at all for what they've done, what their actions are. This cannot and we will not allow it to stand. So we are thankful that he is here. We will continue to fight until justice is done. Thank you.
We'll now turn it to questions.
Attorney Banks, you were a former prosecutor. You prosecuted gang cases. You worked in the DA's office for a long time. These things, these charges usually don't happen in the vacuum. Do you think that they confer with the DA at some point with the legal charges?
I'm not sure of whether they conferred with the District Attorney, Fonnie Willis. While I was a prosecutor for many years, frankly, there were times that APD moved on their own without conferring with the District Attorney's office. There were times that APD worked in conjunction with the District Attorney's office. At this point in time, however, what I know is that the single person to sign the arrest warrants for the city of for Mr. Zulu was Detective Johnson, and she was an employee of the City of Atlanta Police Department. No one from the District Attorney's office took out warrants to arrest Mr. Zulu.
Mr. Banks, what role do you think your client's celebrity status has played in the APD's decision to file charges?
Look, I mean, he has a lot of support, there's no doubt about this. But it's not his celebrity status ultimately that will sway anybody. It's the facts and the circumstances of the investigation. It's the facts that happened that night, that evening, and when you take a close look at the video footage, as well as you interview all of the critical eyewitnesses, the reality is that the only conclusion that you can reach is that he acted in self-defense. And in fact, I will say this, if he is not able to act in self-defense under these facts and circumstances, then I question who on this side of heaven, in Metro Atlanta area, or anybody for that matter across the United States, has the ability to defend themselves. And so I'm not the only attorney here. Of course, Attorney Davis and Attorney Secret are here as well, and I know that they want to participate in this discussion. I am lead counsel. That said, everyone here is able to answer questions on this side of the table.
Attorney Davis, you seem to have quite a following here today to support Chaka. What do you feel that all of this support being here today with the hashtags, what do you hope it will do for your client?
Well, let me start with this, and thank you for that question, Maria. Let's start with the fact, let's be clear, APD has been under fire. So we are not going to allow the fact that they have as many unsolved murders as they have, and they have failed this city on so many different levels, at the highest level. We're not going to allow them to use our client because of his celebrity status to somehow gain some favor. That is not what's going to happen, because for us, there has to be some politically motivated reason, because as we all evaluated, and we've had other attorneys evaluate this video, people are astonished that he was charged. And when things don't make sense, that should make sense logically, then we have to turn to some other motivation outside of the facts. So the facts speak for themselves. So there are some other factors at play here that we have to uncover. And it's really deeply unfortunate that this family of the deceased is being used in the way they're being used. APD is using them. They're not at all being honest with them about the decedent's involvement in what happened. In fact, Corey Crawford and Trayvon Robinson should be charged with their son's murder. Today, because it is a felony murder. They initiated, participated in, and under the statute, they should be charged with this murder. And so all of this energy is absolutely misdirected at a man who was a businessman. This is a middle-aged man who was attacked by 23-year-olds, men as young as one of his own children. Yeah. It's absurd.
Attorney Davis, and any of the attorneys here can answer this. What do you say to the Benton family who said they looked through the warrants and the warrants suggest that Chaka Zulu here was the aggressor in this situation, saying in the warrants that he choked some of the people there? What's your response to the Benton family today?
That assertion is just contrary to the facts of this case. The facts don't support that. When and if you have an opportunity to review the video, you will see that the initial chest contact is from Mr. Benton, that the initial punch that hit Mr. Chaka was from Corey Crawford, then Mr. Benton, that Mr. Benton then stomped him, kicked him, punched him, that those things are just not consistent with the facts. He was not the aggressor in this situation. He was walking from the parking lot on the way into his place of business when he is stopped by them and confronted. He is not the aggressor.
And let me just say this to your question too. It's not lost on Chaka that someone lost his life that evening. The last person that would want to shoot another man is the man sitting to my right. And so, as much as the Benton family has questions, and I can understand their pain and appreciate it because I've represented many victims as a former prosecutor when I work these cases, the reality is this: affidavits don't always speak the truth. And in this case, when you review the video footage and listen to the critical eyewitnesses, the truth is, unfortunately, that their son attacked Chaka from behind and made a decision that ultimately cost him his life that night. And so while we respect and we grieve with the family, frankly, because they lost their loved one, it's not because of anything that this man did unlawfully.
How are you doing mentally and physically after being shot? And just speak to the idea that the person who shot you is still on the streets and does not face charges at this time.
We certainly appreciate your question. He's certainly here and wanted to be present today because this is an important day for him. At this point in time, he's willing to cooperate with the investigation as he has, but he's not going to make any public statements at this point in time.
Gentlemen.
Remarks or comments as to other people who are supporting him, as a message to the public, the supporters?
I will say this, I know this, and he's here. He is so eternally grateful for their support. I know he wants to say it, but I'm going to make sure that he doesn't say it because I want to make sure I protect him from this process going forward. And we are now in a protective posture of him, being forced to protect him, right? Because APD did the wrong thing. He cooperated fully with their investigation, and had they done the right thing, we as lawyers we wouldn't be holding this press conference, frankly. But we're here, he's thankful for everyone's support, and frankly, humbled at the outpouring of support that he's received. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Gentlemen, from the New York Times, this is a question either for Mr. Banks, Mr. Davis, or Mr. Secret. Two questions, if you don't mind. The first one is, have you had any indication from APD or anyone else associated with the bringing of the charges as to why they have not brought additional charges, given the fact that we have video evidence that appears to show acts of violence, other acts of violence? The second question is, can you talk about Georgia and the Stand Your Ground statute and whether or not that plays into a defense of Mr. Zulu?
Sure. So, Georgia, let me answer the second question first, okay? Georgia courts don't speak in stand your ground terms. They use the traditional terms like justification and self-defense. And surrounding that statutory body of law, Georgia clearly says that an individual who is met with threats or force has absolutely no duty or obligation to retreat. And so, in fact, while they don't use the language stand your ground, the reality is that Chaka had every right to stand his ground on that day in question, and we are happy that he did. Now, I forgot your first question, so you're going to have to remind me. I'm so sorry.
Gentlemen, it appears that there is evidence out there on TMZ, on the internet, that other acts of violence occurred.
Yeah.
And so my question is, has anyone at APD or anyone else involved in the investigation of this given you some justification or had a conversation with you about why no one else has been charged in this case?
No. That question needs to be lodged with APD with the chief of police, the interim chief of police. Why no one else was charged is baffling. Everyone that sees the level of violence perpetrated against Chaka we're dumbfounded. I mean, as long as Attorney Secret's been practicing 40 years, 20, 25, and we've never seen anything like this where you have video evidence of this level of violence, yet no arrest. And that's why it, again, raises the question about what other motivation does someone inside of APD have for this? How do they think this is going to advance some other agenda, but not on his back?
Yeah, and it's not, we don't have an answer to that question not because we haven't asked the question, not because we haven't demanded justice on behalf of Chaka. We've talked to the City of Atlanta Police Department and members, as well as the investigating officers who were boots on the ground, asking the very question that you ask us today, and we have been met with no answer.
And we do ask for justice on behalf of Ahmed Chaka Zulu Obafemi, but we also ask for justice for his assistant, who was brutally beaten by Mr. Trayvon Robinson, hit twice, knocked out, and is suffering physical and mental trauma as a result of that. And that person, the police department has not attempted to arrest that person, and have had the audacity in the charges to charge Ahmed Chaka Zulu Obafemi with simple battery. But they didn't charge Trayvon Robinson with simple battery. They didn't charge Corey Crawford with simple battery. They didn't charge the other gentleman, Mr. Stroger, with simple battery. And that's the thing that is so unusual. In the time that I've been practicing in Georgia, typically what happens in cases like this is this. If there are all of these acts of violence that are so clearly and obvious on the video, usually everybody's charged. They charge everybody and then let the district attorney or someone else figure it out. This is a situation where it appears the Atlanta Police Department, for some reason, made a very quick decision, unjustifiably quick decision, to charge exclusively Chaka Zulu.
I want to know if the mayor of Atlanta, Andre Dickens, has had a chance to review this case or the video.
I will say that we would certainly like for those who have authority and oversight to take an interest in justice in Atlanta. Whether or not he's seen the video, I don't know.
Is there anything that he can do to stop anything from going to the DA's office?
The APD, the chief, works for the mayor. And at this point, APD has to be reeled in, clearly. The way they've moved in this case absolutely requires some oversight. They can not manage this themselves fairly and justly. We don't see justice here, and so when you don't see it here, the person who gets to a point, gets to select, is going to have to intervene on some level to redirect them so that the rest of the world can make sense of what's happening in Atlanta right now with policing.
What was, Chaka, what was your association, and I'll speak to you, Mr. Attorney Banks, Chaka Zulu's association with Artez Benton, the 23-year-old young man who is no longer walking this earth? What was the association between Artez and Chaka?
There was none, other than the fact that on the first night that ultimately they didn't even meet. They didn't even have pleasantries. They didn't even exchange hellos, but rather Chaka was attacked by Mr. Benton from behind on that night. That's the first time that he ever encountered Mr. Benton. He doesn't know him, and Mr. Benton didn't know him.
Thanks. Let me just ask you, so you guys all contend that this was all over an issue with VIP parking, bad feelings, feeling disrespected, and then it just escalated into an attack and a shooting? So are you guys contending that that is how this all started, that there was no backstory that led up to this?
There was certainly no backstory whereby Mr. Zulu had any beef with any of these individuals. As it concerns the crew and the decedent having issues about parking and not being able to get into the club or get a table at the club, that certainly is information that we have learned from the witnesses. Why this escalated to the point that it did, was that a part of it? Yes. Is that the rest of the story? I don't believe so. The reality is that as attorneys and as Chaka legal team, his legal team continues to investigate this matter, we are going to unturn every stone to ensure that we have the full picture. Frankly, I will say this. When you watch the video closely, what you see after the decedent and his crew exit the restaurant and the establishment is that they are gathered there in front of the cars commingling as eventually Chaka walks out to go get his special guests. During that time, Corey Crawford goes inside his vehicle and pulls out a gun to arm himself. And then all of a sudden, one of the same crew members approaches Chaka. That is Trayvon Robinson, and has a beef with Chaka that comes from nowhere. He's going out to greet a guest. That's the only thing that's on his mind. There was no prior beef on the inside of the establishment with this, the decedent and or his crew, and then he encounters Trayvon Robinson at that time, and then it escalates. And so, did they have a planned, coordinated attack? I think that that's a question that you need to ask when you watch the video.
Two questions.
Will you be releasing
Before you ask
that
the
video?
question, hold on.
Will you be
hold on.
releasing that video since so much hinges on?
The video is out with TMZ. It's out and it's in the public domain. But I want to point out one other point, is that before Chaka makes any contact with Trayvon Robinson, look at his hands. Look at Robinson's hands. He beckons his crew. So they're already moving. So it's very important that you watch this. They're already moving into place to attack him before there's any physical contact. So the idea that they are somehow coming to his aid because this 52-year-old man is having a rough time with a 23-year-old. No, they were moving on him, and it was in a level of intentionality that you just have to look very closely. And the fact that they've rushed the way they have and not even interviewed Robinson, again, speaks to issues within APD.
But Attorney Davis, to her point with releasing the video, I think it would have been helpful for you guys to have it here so you could go through it, because there are copyright issues with it being out in the domain. So is there any plans of you guys releasing it at all today where you can show, like, this is where his hands were, you see him approaching, anything like that that could guide people to see what you guys are speaking of?
We'll certainly leave that open. Frankly, I don't know why the City of Atlanta Police Department hasn't released the video, right? It's their job to investigate. He doesn't have to do a damn thing, right? And so he has been charged with murder wrongfully. And to the extent that you want something, you should be asking your constituency or the leaders in this community who lead the parade for the video. It doesn't mean that we won't be open to having the video, because we don't have anything to hide from the video. But right now, we are not authorized to release the video. And so as a result, based upon just some legal technicalities that we are trying to do our best to abide by, we haven't released the video. Otherwise, we would be presenting to you today with the video.
Are there other videos, are there other angles of this shooting that you know of? And also, had the fight been separated, had the parties been separated before the first shot was fired?
Absolutely not. So this is very critical. And I think any skilled prosecutor will understand and appreciate that this is a critical analysis of this case. That is, this was a continuous fight, and it really wasn't a fight. It was a man that was fighting for his life because he was attacked from behind. He didn't have a chance, frankly. And so there was no break in the chain of events from the beat down up until the time that Chaka fired his shots lawfully and defended himself in self-defense. And so that's a very critical question. It's a very important question. This was a continuous, ongoing beating and attack of Chaka. In fact, when he reaches his feet, they continue to charge him. The individuals that participated in the beatdown and kicked him and stomped him and punched him are right there in his path as he is attempting to get to safety into the restaurant. And so, no, there was no break in the chain of events, and to the extent that the City of Atlanta Police Department suggests otherwise, that would be a falsehood.
To the point of Chaka not having...
The fact of the matter is that the length of time from the time that Tremont Robinson bumped Chaka in the chest until the shooting was 21 seconds.
To the point of Chaka not having an obligation to retreat while being assaulted, aside from his name being, aside from his celebrity, do you think that his name being Obafemi makes this case a political case beyond just because it's supposed to be a quote-unquote stand your ground state? I'm wondering, why would they charge a man who was being assaulted and clearly, not charge anyone else?
There are some who would suggest or question.
To his point, district attorneys that have prosecuted a lot of individuals associated with the hip-hop community, Chaka's represent one of the biggest rappers in the world. Do you think
There's no correlation between what she's doing with the hip-hop community and Chaka Zulu.
We don't
I mean, there's just no correlation. He's not charged with RICO. He's not charged with gang charges. He's not a member of a criminal street gang. This is a professional businessman who's gone to college, educated himself, worked all his life, been a philanthropist in the community, given back to the community, and so there's no correlation between those indictments and the pending charges against Chaka at this point in time.
We are in Atlanta live right now on Facebook covering this news conference, sir. And it's all, when we talk about the video, it's all about interpretation. You have a lot of supporters behind you, but you also have people who are out there who are saying things and making the statements that say, Chaka, you started the fight, the kid you choked was scared for his life, the reason his friends jumped in to help him. Be a man, say you made a bad mistake. None of the people you and your group was fighting had a gun. or shot a gun.
Well, let me just, that's not true. That's simply not true. And so tell your live viewers, and let me tell them since we're live, that they shouldn't just go on what they believe to be true or what someone else is telling them. What happened at that night is that, first of all, Trayvon Robinson is the first person to have made physical contact with Chaka. He chest bumped him, and he was reaching for a firearm, what Chaka believed to be a firearm. After that chest bump, as he was reaching for his firearm, Chaka tried to prevent him and de-escalate the situation, prevent him from pulling that firearm. And then he is attacked from behind. Look, he is a license to carry. He was lawfully in possession of his gun that night. In fact, when that young man was reaching for his waistband and Chaka believed he had a firearm, the law would have authorized Chaka at that point to pull out his firearm. His better judgment as a peacemaker, trying to de-escalate the situation, was let me try to control this man, prevent him from pulling out a firearm so no one gets shot. Instead of being able to prevent that man from pulling out a firearm, what happened is he was attacked from behind, beaten and pummeled to the ground. He's in a defenseless posture, and eventually he has to get up. And anytime in America, I can tell you this, that 4 people attack you from behind and start kicking and stomping and beating on you, let me tell you something. No man in America is going to be able to believe that he can't act and fire in self-defense. That's what he did on that night. He would do it again if he were in that position, and frankly, he did nothing wrong. And so you tell your viewers that they are wrong about that. They will be wrong about it today. They were wrong about it yesterday. They'll be wrong about it several weeks from now.
And it's impossible.
Thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all. That's it. We good. Watching the video, we saw the guys to the right. They were fighting something to happen. We saw Chaka walk back up to the front of the club. And you can see how Crawford moves to his car to retrieve the firearm.
Yes.
Did Chaka have any inkling that there were a planned attack was going to be perpetrated?
He didn't have any inkling that there was a planned attack, but I will just say this in conclusion, that at some point he learned while on the ground and felt and believed that these individuals were armed. He believed that Trayvon Robinson was armed when he first encountered him. And so when he got up to his feet, he lawfully discharged his weapon. And so look, I know you guys are asking for the video, and we appreciate that. And to the extent that the video is ever released and you guys want us to come back and walk you through what we see, we're happy to do that. At this time, though, we have taken all of your questions. We appreciate all of you for being here, and we ask everyone in the community to stand with Chaka at this time. Sure. Can I what now? Sure. If you want to.
These are family members that have been with him all of his life. These are people who support him and have seen and know his character, and they stand with him, as many people here in Atlanta and around the world, quite frankly, continue to stand with him because they know of his good character.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can we schedule for one break call, please?
That's okay.
Thank you.
Well.